welcome to Walkouts and Knockouts, brought to you by the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We got my man, Mr. Ariel. I'm Jonathan Ramlakan, and we are live for the first post-game show that we've actually done on Walkouts and Knockouts here. And it's a pretty big event, right? UFC is on ABC. There was a lot of well-known names. You know, you had just the main event, obviously Kevin Holland taking on Marvin Vettori. Marvin just did exactly what Derek Brunson did. I just thought I was watching a melanin-less Derek Brunson do exactly what he did to Kevin Holland. And then that co-main event was pretty good too, right? Sodiq, Yusuff, and Arnold Allen went at it. Mackenzie Dern showed off her grappling. Mike Perry showed off his thick skull, right? So overall, there was a good couple of fights. The prelims were sprinkled with finishes, and a lot of heavy implications coming in with this fight. So let's start off with this main event a little bit. And I just want to talk about kind of what you saw, right? Let me hear what you had to see in that fight, because I saw it was a little bit interesting with Kevin Holland. He started off a little bit better than he did in that last fight, right? He worked off his back a little bit better in that first round, but then after, kind of nothing much with that. How did you see that one going?
Yeah, I mean, basically, you hit on it. It was very, very reminiscent of Kevin Holland's last fight, which was literally like a month ago. So props to him for stepping in on short notice and taking on a tough guy, a top 6, the 6th ranked middleweight fighter in the world. Marvin Vettori is a good fighter, man. That dude has some serious ability. He's got potential for sure. Well-rounded, good everywhere. Good stand-up, good counters, really good grappler, good jiu-jitsu. Like, he's just good everywhere. And that's a tough stylistic matchup for Kevin Holland. So props to him for stepping in there. I thought he had some good moments early in the fight, like before he got taken down the first time, at which point everything went downhill. But before that, like, he was letting his hands go, using a lot of different kicks, mixing up the kicks, going low kick, high kick, teep, side kick, like just a whole bunch of different weapons for Marvin to think about. And I was like, okay, like he's looking good out here. I want to see how he looks when Marvin inevitably looks to take it to the inevitably looks to take the fight down to the ground. But I thought he looked all right. And then, like you said, man, rinse and repeat from last fight, right? It was Vettori just getting the takedown, securing the body lock. Most of his takedowns came out of the body lock and from the clinch against the fence. I thought DC was making excellent points on the broadcast about how, Kevin Holland understands probably. He's not stupid. He knows my takedown defense is not very good. I need to be better there. But he just doesn't have the awareness, because he more than likely doesn't put enough time into the grappling, or hasn't in the past, to where he knows when somebody grabs a hold of you and his arms, he puts his arms around you, he's looking for the body lock and he's going to clasp his hands. The first thing you do is you start working on the hands or you look to get underhooks. And just Kevin Holland doesn't seem to have the awareness to do that. And it was just more or less smooth sailing for Vettori as soon as he started getting those takedowns. Set the middleweight record at 11 takedowns in a fight. So it is what it is. Props to Kevin Holland for stepping in, but I thought Vettori looked great, man.
Yeah, he looked absolutely phenomenal. Like you said, he looks like a legit threat to the middleweight king right now, Israel Adesanya. I wanted to thank Tony Mirage for joining us. Looking back, the Joker versus Vettori fight was a lot closer than people thought. It was really close. It seemed in that fight, like in the third round, that the Joker was picking that up. But Vettori came out strong in that fight. And I really think Vettori won that fight convincingly. I do agree that the Joker had his moments in that fight. But Vettori is just proving himself to become an amazing fighter, right? He stepped in on short notice to take on Jack Hermanson. I think Darren Till was supposed to fight Jack Hermanson. And he just mopped the floor with Jack, right? He dropped him in the first round, and I think he really should have tried to go for the finish there instead of going for maybe the choke or something. But he dropped him in the first round. He kind of slowed down a little bit in the third round, but fourth and fifth round, he kind of picked back up. And getting into this fight, right, he did a phenomenal job of just rinse and repeat. Like you said, the theme of this fight was definitely that he set the middleweight record for most takedowns in a fight, right? And you said it perfectly. Kevin Holland kind of knew what he was supposed to do, but he just didn't have the physical wherewithal to actually do every single one of the things he had to do. And it's a hole in his game, right? You saw on the feet, every time he was on the feet, he was landing. Like you said, very good kick diversity. He was letting the hands late. He was hitting shots that, even if it was for 30 seconds or a minute that the fight was on the floor, Vettori was in trouble almost all that time to where he had to take it to the thing. So, props to Kevin Holland to, stepping up, taking this fight on short notice and filling a big hole on ABC. And then, obviously bringing his name up a little bit more. People might not, like the performance they see tonight, but you heard him in that 5th round, right? He let out. He's like fuck, because he knew that in the 5th round, immediately he's like sorry ABC, because he knew that they're on ABC.
Look, if you don't like that fight, it's just because you don't understand the basics of grappling, which is fine. Like, you don't have to be some like elite grappler to appreciate grappling in MMA, and nobody's expecting you to. But the reality is, in a fight, you do what you have to do. George St. Pierre, arguably, one of the top 3 or 4 greatest mixed martial artists in history, would do exactly what he needed to do every single fight. A lot of the time, that involved a boring stick and move where he's just jabbing all night and keeping his opponent at distance. Sometimes it was a takedown, and he would just take guys down over and over and over. And it's not the most aesthetically pleasing, but that's how you win fights. So yes, we all love the knockouts and whatever, but to me, that's not a boring fight. To me, that's a young fighter who's really, really coming into his own. He's showing improvement every time out, and he's doing what he needs to do against another like really good fighter. Kevin Holland's a 10th ranked guy in the division. He's not a scrub. He didn't lose a fight last year. Like, he did what he had to do, and he got the W. So maybe it's not the most entertaining fight, but it's not a boring fight by any means. And I hope that nobody came away with that takeaway.
Right. I mean, Vettori was doing the right things on top. Maybe not a lot of ground and pound, but he was passing that guard over and over again. He was getting from full guard, then to half guard, then to mount, right? And then he almost had him choked out, right? He almost had that head and arm choke almost twice.
Made some mistakes on finishing that, which was kind of surprising to me because he's a pretty high level grappler. But when you grab the arm triangle from side control, it's a leverage. Like, DC made a great point on that too. That's a leverage submission. So it's not so much about how hard you squeeze, but how you position your body. So if he's grabbing it with his
right.
Exactly. If he's grabbing it with the right arm, with his right arm rather, he needs to be dropping, Vettori does, his left shoulder to the mat and get lower. And that's how you get the leverage and you get a tighter submission hold there. But he was a little too high up on it both times that he grabbed it. A little surprising to me.
Yeah, but I mean, he's working out of King's MMA. They have great people. They have Kevin Gastelum, a couple of great fighters out there. But getting into that GSP thing, you said it perfectly. I was actually listening to the podcast he had with Joe Rogan they released, I think, within the last week or so. He was saying, I mean, to retain the title, or really just to win any fight, right, you're not the one that has to take that risk, right? You're only imposed to take that risk when you're down. And that's when Kevin Holland had to do, right? He had to put his hips in position to get snatched up, basically, by Marvin Vettori and take it down. So let's get into a little bit of matchmaking, right? Because Vettori, he's ranked 6th, I think, coming into this fight. But now the question is, what's next for him, right? Because he was supposed to fight Darren Till. He did what he was supposed to when he squashed, Kevin Holland. But he has 5 guys in front of him. Darren Till, right? That was the fight that's supposed to happen. Derek Brunson, right? I mean, I don't think that's the fight that's for him. He doesn't deserve a fight that small, right? He's done the right things. He beat Jack Hermanson when he was a high-ranked fighter. He just held his spot by beating Kevin Holland, right? I think Derek Cannonier or Paulo Costa probably is one of the 2, shots for him would be really good. Dude, Paulo Costa versus Marvin Vettori, dude, that would be a fun fight. But I think if Robert Whittaker loses that fight against Kevin Gastelum, what's really going to be the thing that's holding him back? Because he's the guy that took Izzy to a split decision, right? Only guy to do that in the middleweight division. Rob Whittaker, yeah, of course, if he wins that fight, I think he undoubtedly deserves that title shot. But if Marvin Vettori wins this fight, I think it's really, really, if Robert Whittaker loses this fight, I think that puts Marvin in a really good spot, because I think that puts him in a position to go fight for the title. Because if you think about a competitive matchup, right, you put it this way, Marvin Vettori is like a couple inches shorter, but the same exact thing as Jan Blachowicz, right? He's almost kind of a cut and pick paste, right? Just a small play, maybe not as much kicks, more boxing, but he's really well-rounded. He's good at submissions, right? He has decent hands, and he's able to take you down. And he was able to take Izzy down, right? He was able to do that in this first fight. So what's stopping him from coming back and getting this fight? What do you think about that?
I'm totally with you. I was hoping you would say anybody but Paulo Costa, but it's too obvious. I think that's got to be, if they can make that happen, that's the fight. I think it's kind of tough. Like, say Robert Whittaker loses a fight, it's kind of tough to on one end to justify giving the 6th ranked guy. Well, I guess maybe he moves up to like 5 or he stays at 6 after this win. I don't know. But it's kind of hard to justify giving the 6th ranked guy a title fight. Although what he does have working for him, like you said, is the fact that they fought before. It was a closer fight. He's marketable. He's young enough. He's got a style where like he does have exciting fights. Like he finished a whole bunch of fights, got a lot of submissions on his resume. Like you can absolutely market that fight. I do think, though, there needs to be another fight. He needs to beat a top 5 guy. He would have had that opportunity tonight if didn't pull out. What's his name? Darren Till hadn't had been able to make the fight. Probably Paulo Costa. I'm looking at the middleweight rankings right now. I see Jared Cannonier up there. I kind of feel like coming off that loss to Robert Whittaker, maybe you can make a case there, but I feel like Paulo Costa just has to be. That's the fight.
Yeah.
I think that's the fight.
Yeah, I mean, the only guy that Paulo Costa really has lost to is a champ, right? He's undefeated. That was a big fight going into it. Both of those guys were undefeated going into the fight. Somebody's had to get taken and ended up being Paulo Costa, but that doesn't mean Paulo Costa is that much less of a threat. Paulo Costa is a monster, right? He has those heavy hands. I'm sure he learned from that fight. Maybe not. He's probably still drinking wine. But he learned from that fight. I think that's definitely the fight to make if Robert Whittaker, wins that fight and secures that number 1 spot as that number 1 contender. But let's get into Kevin Holland a little bit now, because now that puts him in an interesting position, right? He's ranked number 10. He beat Jacare Souza to get his ranking, right? Now he's kind of in a spot where he won 5 straight, then he lost 2 in a row. Where do you think that puts him now? He's probably still a 10, right? He doesn't lose his spot. But what do you think? Does he fight somebody a little bit higher than him? Does he fight somebody a little bit lower than him? What do you think to do with him?
So I think that, the UFC, when you've got DC, Dominic Cruz, those guys on the call, they are on point with everything. They are fire. They are one of the best announcing teams in all of sports. Like, they know the sport in and out, and they were making great points. One of the things they brought up was that, I think maybe it had been something that Kevin Holland said, that he likes having the layoff. Like, he'll take any fight. He'll step in and take in any fight. But it kind of puts him in a tough spot where he's not really able to have a legitimate fight camp and be able to work on the things he needs to work on. Right now, it's very evident that everybody in the middleweight division knows that he needs to be working on his ground game and his takedown defense. So if I'm him, I'm probably, putting off fighting for like a good 5 months, 4 to 6 months, I would say. Work on the grappling, work on the ground game, work on the takedown defense. So I don't know where the division is 4 to 6 months from now. Maybe a fight with Uriah Hall down the line. That could be a fun fight. I mean, it might not really test his takedown defense and whether or not he makes any improvements in that area, but it would be a fun fight. And maybe that's just what Kevin Holland is. Maybe he's just like a, fight night headliner or main card Kickstarter where you get like a banger of a fight. And so maybe a Uriah Hall fight makes a lot of sense, for entertainment purposes.
I mean, you think about somebody like Andrei Arlovsky at the back end of his career after he became a champion, right? He didn't really win that title back, but he was still a guy you throw on the card, you throw on the top of a fight.
Yeah, you get a good fight.
Like that, right? He's a great fighter. I want to answer Tony's question real quick. If Marvin gets the shot at Rob and wins, do I think Izzy gives Marvin the rematch? If that were to happen, I think so. But, Rob has that fight with Kelvin Gastelum coming up. So I don't think that if Rob beats Gastelum, I don't see Marvin fighting Rob, right? I think Marvin would probably fight Izzy. And then Rob would probably fight Paulo Costa, right? Do something like that. And then have maybe like Till fight Gastelum, right? Because Gastelum's so low. Because they can run that fight back. They can they can market it that way. So there's a couple things they can do with the division. But as far as Kevin Holland goes, I think the next thing you want to do for him is definitely put him somebody where he's a wrestler, right? Maybe you put him against a former champ like Chris Weidman, right? Somebody who's trying to have a resurgence in his career.
He's actually terrible matchup for him if Chris Weidman's good. If he's good to go, that's an awful matchup.
Right. But I think in UFC 261, Weidman's fighting Hall.
Oh,
right.
That card, by the way, is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
That card's ridiculous.
Top to bottom. It's just even the prelims are stacked. And we'll get to that. We'll talk about that a little bit towards the end, but that's going to be a fun one. But I think maybe like a Chris Weidman, if he loses the fight, right, to Uriah Hall, Weidman's 11, Holland is 10th. That's something you can do. Maybe a Brad Tavares, right? Because Tavares is one of these guys that's been a veteran in the game. He's good at mixing it up, right? He's good on the feet. He's good on the ground. So I think maybe a guy that's a gatekeeper type for Kevin Holland. You can put him to kind of build his takedown defense a little bit. He's not as great a wrestler as Vettori or as Brunson, but he'll still be able to test those chops and get into with that. But let's get into this co-main event. Do you have any final thoughts on this main event before we move on?
No, I think we covered everything. Let's go over to that young strapping fellow from the TriStar MMA.
And I was actually I was kind of upset that the card was so early this morning because I wanted to bring that up. You know, I was looking into his background and I was seeing that Arnold the Almighty Allen was actually he's coming in as an underdog, and I was so confused.
That made no sense to me. I didn't even know that going into like doing all my scouting and whatever. And after I had done the scouting of the fighters, I was like, dude, Arnold Allen should win this fight. He's just a better fighter.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of crazy.
It was because I was watching tape for that fight, right? And I saw that he was able just to take the fight down to the ground a lot, right? He was able to take the fight down. He was good. He had that good 1-1-2 combination. He has that good high kick, right? He added that high kick after he came to the UFC. I didn't see him do that in the regional circuit. I saw him come that and do that to the in the UFC. And he's great at the takedowns, right? But man, this was kind of a really fun fight. These were two guys that were undefeated coming into the undefeated in the UFC coming into this fight, and you know it was just pretty much it was fireworks, right? Because you had two guys throwing at him, you know, really really big moments. You had that left hand in the first round that dropped Yusuff, right, and then in the second round you had the high kick that dropped him. Yeah. So a lot of fun in that fight. How did you see that one going?
I thought it was a really good fight. I think Arnold Allen really might be something to keep an eye on, like for real. I think this guy has he's good everywhere. His stand-up reminds me a little bit of, I mean, he's just the prototypical like high-level TriStar fighter where he comes out with really solid fundamentals, doesn't throw anything crazy. You're not going to see a ton of like spinning wheel kicks and hook kicks and all kinds of crazy shit, but he will jab, right hand. Well, yeah, he'll jab, he'll throw the backhand, the right hand. He'll put his high kick behind his jab or the right hand. Like he's just very solid everywhere. Excellent footwork, good movement in and out. Knows he always circling to the right direction. He's never moving in the wrong direction. Just very aware. Elite level coaching. That's what you get when you work with some of the best coaches in the world and some of the best training partners in the world.
Overall, at the gym talking to him, right?
Absolutely. GSP's in there all the time. And I thought that Yusuff probably was maybe a little bit more busy, but I thought that Allen was sharper. Like he was definitely the sharper fighter. He landed the shots that affected the fight more, that were more significant, and had the bigger moments. All the big moments of the fight belonged to Allen. He dropped Yusuff a couple of times, and just generally, like I thought I gave the last round to Yusuff. It was kind of a closer round.
Yeah,
but I gave it to Yusuff. Yeah, I gave it to Yusuff. But I mean, overall, I thought that Allen looked great. Might have got a little bit tired towards the end of the fight, so maybe that's something to keep an eye on and work on. But other than that, man, that kid has a really good skill set. He's built, he looks good, he's fit, and he's just a good fighter. He's good all around.
I mean, you said to it, right? These athletes today really are just molds of what the coaching and everything around them do, right? That's what really creates the athlete, and he has a great system over at TriStar. You heard Faraz Sahabi, he was like, before that third round started, he was like, hey, man, you won the first two rounds. You dropped him, right? Get him to the fence, take him down, right? He's going to come out. He's going to try to hurt you. That's his only chance of winning this fight. Come out, take him down. And for a young fighter, right, a guy that's still a couple of years before hitting 30 years old, that's really important to get into their head, right? And what that's culminated into is the longest featherweight streak right now active in the division over Alexander Volkanovski and Zabit Sharipov, right? So, but yeah, like he's just showing so much, you know, as far as a fighter. You know, Yusuff, he really didn't have a lot of bad moments in this fight, right? He, like you said, he was kind of controlling the pace, but he got caught a couple of times, right? And now he has to know what he has to work on too. He had weaknesses against southpaws before, so this is kind of just a recurring thing with him. So maybe he'll understand that a little bit better. But I think there's a lot of things that he can take out of this game plan and just kind of learn from moving forward. Maybe increase that takedown defense. You know, guard that straight left hand. You know, but let's get into what's next for Arnold Allen, because ranked 11th, right? There's a couple of guys ahead of him. I think he was supposed to fight Josh Emmett, right? And that fight fell out. Do you put him back in there with Josh Emmett, or who do you have? You have, Edson Barbosa's scheduled to fight Shane Burgos. He's ranked 7th. Danny Gay's fighting the Korean Zombie. He's 6th. Calvin Kattar just lost, right? He's open. Where do you put him next?
I like the idea of just putting him back in there with Josh Emmett. Think that's a good fight. Otherwise, Calvin Kattar could be a fun fight. I don't know if he's ready for. Should I go to the next one? I don't know if I want to go to the next guy in the division, but I don't know if he's quite ready for a somebody at the level of Chan Sung Jung. But let's go with put him back in there with Josh Emmett. That's the fight he was supposed to have. I think that's a really good matchup, and that should be the next fight for him.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect match. He wants to fight somebody that's a little bit ahead of him. And I think if he goes in there and he wins that fight handedly, that puts him in perfect position, right? Because now over the next couple of weeks, right, you have Ige, who's 6th, fighting the Korean Zombie, who's ranked 4th. And that's happening in 2 months, right? So you have that happening. You have the Volkanovski versus Brian Ortega Ultimate Fighter thing happening. So that's happening. You have 7th ranked Edson Barbosa taking on Shane Burgos next month.
Sorry, real quick. You've got Edson Barbosa ranked 7th, because I'm looking at the UFC rankings from the UFC, from UFC.com, and Edson Barbosa's ranked 14.
Oh, yeah. I'm using a different website because I'm using a one that shows a bunch of rankings. So I could be a little bit wrong with these, right? Because I see.
So they've got Josh Emmett at 7. They've got Dan Ige
at
8.
Yeah. Okay. I see. Yeah. So, but yeah, all those guys are matched up right now, right? So I think this puts a good position for Arnold Allen. Go get a win against Josh Emmett, right? Take maybe a couple months, 3 months, because the fights are going to have to take a little bit of time. Or go get that fight with him. And then now you're waiting for maybe a top 3 guy, right? Whoever loses, do you fight Alexander Volkanovski if he loses after you beat Josh Emmett, right? You put him in there with somebody like Yair Rodriguez, There's a bunch of options. The top of this featherweight division is stacked. It's probably
I think he definitely needs a fight against somebody who's like, a little bit closer to his range in the rankings before we make that jump, because all these guys that you're mentioning right at the top of that division are monsters. And I'm not saying that I don't think Arnold Allen's ready for it, but I want to see a little bit more before I throw him in there with somebody like, Yair Rodriguez or God forbid, Alexander Volkanovski. Not God forbid, but that's a tough fight, man.
Yeah,
Volkanovski's a bad son of a gun.
Dude, the only guy to put away Max Holloway twice, no matter how you score it, he was close enough to get the nod, right? He was still close enough to get the nod. And that's crazy, right? So that'd be a little much for him. I think he needs a little bit of developing too. I think the UFC should do a good job of molding him, right? He's a guy that's a European guy. Maybe if Darren Till isn't that superstar anymore because he's lost a couple fights, right? He's always injured. Maybe Darren Till just isn't that guy, right? Maybe he's just not that guy. And now you have a guy that you can build, right? The UFC is so global that you want to build these guys up, right? So you can build this guy up. He's right now undefeated in the UFC, just has one loss on his record. I mean, he's sitting pretty. Let's get to Sodiq Yusuff a little bit. He was ranked, let me see the official rankings, 11th, right? But this kind of puts him a little bit back. But I think a really fun fight, probably a little bit mean to do him, right, would be Sodiq Yusuff versus like Movsar Evloev, right? Evloev is one of these guys that just goes there and ragdolls you, completely versus striker versus grappler fight, right? And I think that would be a fun one. What kind of fight do you think Sodiq Yusuff should be looking at and getting into?
So you said that Edson was booked, correct?
Yeah, he's booked.
Edson has a fight.
The 15th versus Shane Burgos. And my God, that's going to be a good fight. Shane Burgos versus Edson Barbosa. My God.
Maybe. So then in that case, I'm going to say Sodiq gets the loser of that fight, or maybe the winner. I don't know. So whoever, you can put him against either of those guys. Both guys are ranked lower than him in the division. I think a fight with Edson Barbosa could be a lot of fun. So either of those guys, they're ranked lower than him. So I'll say he gets the winner of that fight.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to go. Just put him with another striker. That division really isn't too wrestling heavy, right? That's probably one of the lighter wrestling, maybe outside of Zabit, right? He's the one guy that's the real wrestling guy. Volkanovski will take you down, but he's known for really just putting you out, right? He has that power. He has that 215-pound frame or whatever he did playing rugby, all compacted in that 145-pound body. So that's going to be a fun one. But lots of things to do in that featherweight division. Lots of movement coming up. I want to thank PR Crazy at 53. Yeah, 53. I think Kelvin's going to win next week against Robert Whittaker. Surprise, surprise. I actually think that's a possibility. because Kelvin Gastelum as let's get into that one actually. Yeah, we'll
we can
get
stray. Let's have some fun.
Yeah. Why not? Let's get into it, right? Good. We'll just shout out everybody else. Good wins by Julian Marquez. That was a nice choke.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that one, right? And he called out the Kansas City Chiefs afterwards. That was an interesting call out.
Yeah, that was the was that where he choked him without the hooks, right? That was the rear naked. Yes, sorry, I watched a lot of fights today. Yeah, I thought that was impressive. I mean, like, look, that fight was literally just put on the card to be like the banger, where it's like two dudes who are gonna stand and bang, and it was a really good fight. Like I thought Alvey was trying to kill Julian Marquez with every single shot he threw. Consistently found himself with his back against the fence, which is partially due to Julian Marquez just being a fucking like berserker who's always coming forward. But also a little bit, if I'm Sam Alvey, I'm looking to circle a little bit more instead of, in and out every single time. It's a little bit of a dangerous game to play against a guy like that who wants to come forward. And so you're constantly finding yourself with your back foot against the fence. It's just a dangerous place to be. But that's what Sam Alvey is, man. He's just a guy who gets in there, throws big shots, and, you get fun fights out of him. Same with Julian, same with Marquez. So, yeah, thought it was a good fight. Thought it was an interesting way to lock up that submission. I think that was the second one of the night, right? There were two. Who was the other guy that finished a rear naked choke without the hooks?
Impa Kasanganai. I think it was the first one of the night.
Yeah, so no, I did catch that one. Okay, there we go. So yeah, thought that was a fun fight. It did what it was supposed to do up there, and no complaining about that one.
No, that was a fun one, and that
the shoes. Stop it, bro. Stop it, man. Alvey's fun. Come on. He's not in there to make a title run. He's in there to just bring you banger fights, slobber knockers.
He's there to get CTE. All right, he's in the league of just getting.
He wants to do it.
He's just gonna smile until he just can't remember why he's smiling anymore. It's just a muscular thing that happens to his face. But all in all, Sam Alvey, this was his 50th pro MMA fight, right? He's a veteran in the game. What, like, how many first round knockouts? 10 plus, right? Setting a lot, but
a lot, I'm sure.
But he's lost his last 4 or last 5, right? He's not on a good run at all. So I think he might be on the chopping block. I think he's on his way to Bellator, PFL, one of those other things. But and maybe he's in there. He had Julian Marquez hurt. He had Julian. he said no smiling, no Alvey. But he stopped that smile at the end of the round, right? He choked him, so he was no longer smiling at any of that. I was like, what does he have to do to make him stop smiling? Because he was smiling that whole fight. I guess to choke him out, that's the best thing to do. But
I think it's hard not to root for anybody who's in a fist fight and is smiling the entire way. So
fair point.
Can't root against Alvey. I hope the UFC holds on to him.
Yeah, he's a fun guy. He's kind of like Jim Miller, right? He's kind of on that same thing, except he's Jim Miller is the grappling version of Sam Alvey, right? He used to be on the top end of getting those submissions. Now he's kind of on the back end of getting taken down, getting controlled. But fun one. Mackenzie Dern, she won her fight impressively, and I think, man, she's well on her way to getting a title shot. I do feel bad for him too, Josh. He was like, I kind of feel bad. He's losing all these fights, but he's going and smiling, man. I'm not sure if he's just smiling to hide the pain.
I think anymore. He likes to do it. Somebody who's getting in there and smiling his ass off before he's about to get punched in the face by a monster like Julian Marquez. Don't feel bad for him. He knows what he's doing. He loves it. These dudes are all psychopaths. We're all nuts.
I mean, we're watching two guys go in there and just try to punch each other's head till they come off. I guess we're civilized Romans. I guess that's what it's like, kind of. But she was really, really impressive. She came out. She took the fight down to the ground. She tied the record for, I think, strawweight. I think that's the fight, right? Strawweight submissions, right? She tied Juliana. No, I can't remember her name. Jillian Roberts. That's who she tied.
All I know is they mentioned it on the broadcast. That's all I know. Yeah,
so she tied her for getting the most UFC submissions in that division. And that was impressive, right? And now that puts her in a top 5 predicament as well. What did you see in that fight? Because that was so impressive, the way she worked from guard, half guard, get that arm, not roll back, right? They talked about it, like you said, in the broadcast. Broadcast was phenomenal tonight. Those 3 guys are geniuses. Yeah. It's perfect together. Perfect, right? She didn't roll back, right? Because then she could have get stacked up and she wouldn't able to extend her back to get that arm. But she stayed on top of it, right? Until she was just able to. Last 12 seconds, she finally gets it. I was like, is she going to be able to hold on for a minute on the arm bar? She did. She got it. She was able to finish that fight. How did you see that one going?
She's just a superbly elite grappler. Like, we know about the credentials. The credentials are there. But to see it in action, it's just like you gain such an appreciation for it. Like when she's on the ground, there is no, what's the word? Like there's no rush to do anything. Everything is set up. Everything follows a sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And she knows exactly what her next move is going to be. Jiu-jitsu is literally one human chess match is what it is. And she is a master at it. I thought early in the fight, she kind of came forward throwing a little bit wild, which is something to keep an eye out if we're going to be putting her into that top 5 discussion where she's going to be fighting elite level fighters. I know her strikes are, absolutely. I know her strikes have improved, but they're still not quite at a level where I'm totally comfortable with that. So just something to keep an eye on. But if she's able to close distance like she did against Nina Nunes, which again, like Nina Nunes is not a scrub. She's an elite striker on her own. So if you're able to close distance without getting clipped there, that's at least a very good sign. She initiates the clinch. They trade some shots. Dern clinches, takes her down, just finishes a throw, ends up in full guard. Nunes was trying to neutralize it by working a really high rubber guard and doing all kinds of things, head control. But man, Mackenzie Dern is just too good down there. She's too good. She moves from position to position, just within a flow, and then eventually, isolates that arm, extends it, and that's good night. You're not getting out of that with somebody like Mackenzie Dern on top of you.
Yeah, no, I mean, she did everything she had to do it right. Like you said, she played that chess match perfectly. She came out, like you said, striking needs to improve a little bit more, right? She started her career earlier a little too heavy on the hands, right? But now she's toned it back and she's really gotten back to her roots of submissions. But she just did it perfectly, right? She worked into that submission perfectly. And now she's put herself in the UFC top 5, right? She's in the top 5 of the ranking. Not quite ready for a UFC title shot just yet, right? She's
No.
She needs the hands to go in there and fight with somebody like Weili Zhang, right? Because somebody as right that's
yeah, she does,
right? So there's a couple of people that she can be the next, right? She has Carla Esparza. I think that she's going to be fighting Yan Zionan, right? She's going to be fighting next. One of those two guys. Maybe she could take the loser of those fight. What do you think has to be next for her?
This is kind of masochistic, but remind me, is Joanna booked?
Let me see. I will let you know.
Because
right now.
If Joanna's not booked, I mean, if Mackenzie Dern can beat Joanna, if she can get through that fight without going to sleep, or at least just getting pieced up and not being able to get close enough to take Joanna down because the striking difference is that much, that would be a really interesting fight. You could market the crap out of that one. Mackenzie Dern, up and coming, jiu-jitsu ace. She's a pretty woman. Like, it's very marketable, and she's elite in her skills, which is the number one thing. And so you can definitely probably sell a fight with her and Joanna. So I don't know if we want to go that far, but I think that's a really interesting fight. I would be very excited about that one.
I mean, she's not booked, right? But the thing is, she wants a big fight. So maybe a fight against an up-and-comer like this that can seal herself as a title contender, right? Because she knocked somebody that's rising this good on such a good win streak. That puts you in pretty good position to fight for the title again. And she arguably won that fight, right? But a couple people that are ahead, like we said, Joanna's there. Claudia Gadelia, right? Another grappler, right? Do you put her against another grappler? That would be kind of an interesting one, especially with two people that are just able to move. So they have so much flexibility, right? They're just so flexible. They will get in and out of these positions. But a couple of options that are good for her there. Fun opener to the card. Any final thoughts to this one, right? Before we get to this Mike Perry fight.
No other thoughts, but the shoes, we appreciate you, bro. See you in the comments on the Miami Heat post game streams and all that. So we appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks as always for checking us out. But let's get into the Mike Perry fight, because that was a banger, right? Mike Perry. Mike Perry's head is so hard, dude. I don't know what he does.
How does his nose break like every fight, man? Like,
it was
tough.
He used to be so. I mean, not that he's not a good-looking guy, but he had like a really, he was a good-looking guy, and now he had that fight with Luque, and after that fight, man, that his nose is just broken every single time I've seen him fight. But that was a fun fight. How did you see that one happening? That was just.
I thought Rodriguez was just several levels ahead of Mike Perry on the feet, and it was really the difference. Mike Perry didn't have very much, if any. Did he get a takedown in that fight? I don't feel like he did. He did?
He got 2.
Oh, did he? Okay. Then I remember it incorrectly. But I felt like for most of that fight, Rodriguez was just finding a home for his straight shots all night. The straight, the jab, he was popping him, and those jabs were not like he was throwing those jabs out there to set up the right hand, but also to inflict some damage. Like it's not like a jab just to touch you. It's like a stiff jab. So he would pop him and you would see Perry's head pop back, and then he'd follow that up with the straight right and just constantly found a home for it all night. I thought he looked great, man. I kind of felt a little bit bad for Mike Perry. I felt like he was kind of in there to be a punching bag. Rodriguez looked great. That's what I took away from that one. That fight delivered as well, though. Was entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, that's the perfect fight, right? That's just one of those fights that are just so much fun to watch, just so much fun. They both came out. He was eating shots, so it was like, man, listening to Mike Perry talk, I think he already getting the early stages of CTE, to be honest with you, right?
Well, you seen any of those videos at the bar or whatever, you already got some something's going on there.
Something, right? Something's going on there. For him to take a beating like that, man. Entertaining fight, but a little bit much for him. But let's get into these matchmaking. I don't think any of these guys were ranked, if I'm correct, right? Yeah, none of those guys were.
Rodriguez
ranked.
Wasn't. No, I don't think Mike Perry was.
Yeah, so I'm pulling up the welterweight rankings below the 15th, right? Rodriguez.
So I only have up to 15 here, and I am not putting him in there with. Well, you know what? You could probably make an argument. Is Robbie Lawler booked?
No, that would be a good one.
Give me Rodriguez, Robbie Lawler. Yeah,
that would be a good one indeed. Let's see, Mike Perry. Where's Mike Perry? I can't find Mike Perry. He's 31 ranked. Dang, bro, he dropped really low. But I mean, he lost to Mickey Gall, lost to Jeff Neal, or lost to Tim Means. Sorry, lost to Jeff Neal. Tim Means is ranked 30th, roughly, right? Because these are just rough rankings.
Yeah.
But for Mike Perry, he's just on the downfall, right? Now he's lost 3 of his last 4. He's not on the best strike. He did get with a new gym, but it didn't really seem to do much with him. Daniel Rodriguez is about 28th ranked. You could probably put him in there with Nico Price. That would be a fun fight.
Mm-hmm.
Nico Price.
It would be fun. Where's Nico Price?
Nico's 20th, and he had to draw with Cerrone and lost to Luque and the win versus James Vick.
Honestly, when you're looking below 15, like at guys ranked 20 to 30, I mean, just make the best fights that are the most entertaining and complement guys' skill sets. If you're trying to push Rodriguez ahead in the division, then try to make a fight that's the most entertaining. But yeah, I mean, Nico Price is a banger. That'd be a fun fight. Yeah,
that would be a fun one indeed. I think that would be just. I think Rodriguez would just put him out, right? He's a little more burly, right? He's a little more burly. I mean, unless Nico Price has one of those off his back up kicks or something like that where he gets the win.
Is it just me, or does he look kind of big for that division?
He does.
Like his body fat. I'm not calling him fat at all. He's in very good shape, but I just mean like his body fat percentage is probably a little bit higher than most guys that you would see at that weight class, and he's taller than a guy like Mike Perry. So like, how does he make the? I wonder how much. I feel like he probably has a lot of weight to cut to make the division.
Yeah, he looks like he cuts 10, 15 pounds of water that week.
At least.
Right? Yeah. He goes in there probably weighing like 185, 188. He's a big guy. He's just a big. Do we have
his height right off the top of our heads? Because I don't. So by us, I mean you.
I could pull it up right now.
He looked tall. I mean, he looks like he's at least 6 feet.
He's 6 foot exactly.
For sure. Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. But he's burly, right? He has like a wide back too, so he has that. And he's coming in. He's won of his last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
He's won
9,
like 4 out of
10 of his last 11.
Wow.
He only has 2 losses on his thing. He's 14-2. That's a 7 knockouts, 4 submissions, 3 decisions. So you can sell him as a finisher, right? He has a 80% finishing rate. He just took out Mike Perry, and we didn't even see him use his jiu-jitsu. He fights at a jiu-jitsu gym, right? So that's something that we still have to see to him. This could be a guy that we could be sleeping on that could be answering that top 15 within the next year or two.
I don't even want to see him use his jiu-jitsu if he's lighting you up with the 1-2 all night like that. Like, it's maybe not the most, exciting strikes, but I love the clinical approach to striking. Like, I've spent some time at TriStar. The coach that I initially trained with when I was kickboxing, was a guy who trained under Faraz for a long time, and with Eve Edwards and guys like that. So growing up, growing up in kickboxing is what I mean. I was drilled to like prioritize the simple stuff, the jab, the cross, the low kick, just like the 1-2 left hook, whatever it is, but the basics are what win you fights. And that's what you find a home for in fights consistently. So I love watching a guy like that just throw 1-2s all night and consistently just snap Perry's head back. Like that to me is clinical. I love that.
And, he did it in a really, really, like you said, a technical way. He wasn't looping his punches overly, right? He was nice. He was clean. He was touching them, right? He wasn't really aiming to knock his head off every time. They talked about it on the broadcast, right? He was touching him, so where when he fainted, Mike Perry had to react because he knew he was going to get touched. He didn't know he was going to get knocked out, but he knew he was going to get touched. And
that's why you're landing it. That's why you're landing it every time too, because when you faint, dude thinks, oh, he's going to throw, so I'm going to move my head back. And then you realize, oh, wait, he's not actually throwing. He's throwing a lot of feints. So next time he does it, I'm likely to think he's going to feint, but now he's popping you. Right. So it's just, it's just clinical.
It was beautiful to watch. It was beautiful to watch that. It was beautiful to watch Arnold Allen. His footwork was so amazing. Dude, he has great footwork. And just a lot of fun fighters on this card. A lot of good prelims as well. Just a couple of finishes. But let's get into next week because we have a fun card next week. Topped off by Robert Whittaker, the Reaper, taking on Kelvin Gastelum. Let's give the teaser for that one before we close out the show. How do you see that one going down? And pretty heavy implications. Is this a title shot? Lock in for Robert Whittaker.
If you're Robert Whittaker, it definitely is. But honestly, if you're Kevin Gastelum and you win that fight, then you have as good of a case as anybody for a title shot as well. So, I'm a huge Robert Whittaker fan. I love the way he fights. He's an absolute warrior, super elite level boxing. And I'm not going to say boxing. I'm going to say kickboxing because he lands that head kick at as high a rate as anybody in the UFC. Loves to throw it behind the right hand. Like he's just so good at it, man. And he gets better as fights go on. I'm a big Robert Whittaker fan. Kelvin Gastelum has some strength. He's improved leaps and bounds as a fighter since he burst onto the UFC scene. That's an interesting fight. I'm not going to give my prediction, but I'm looking forward to it. I really like both fighters.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good fight. Like you said, Robert Whittaker is one of these guys. Dude went to war with Yoel Romero twice. Like, not a lot of people go to war with Yoel Romero twice and live to tell a story. And I mean, he almost didn't live, right? He got close to getting put out, but he's a champion. He won the champion really, really young, right? And now he's back again, and he's making this second push to become a champion again. And Kelvin Gastelum, after putting Israel Adesanya on the brink to winning that interim belt, he's lost a couple in a row, but now he's kind of rekindled that fire. He's working at King's MMA, so his fellow contender buddy Marvin Vettori is working with him, right? And it's probably inspiring him to kind of get back up as well. So that's going to be a fun fight. We have a good, guy implementing his wrestling game in Kelvin Gastelum and Robert Whittaker. Co-main event, that's going to be a fun one as well, though. Jeremy Stephens versus Drakkar Klose. That's going to be a banger. Dude, Jeremy Stephens has been in the UFC since 2007.
Who the fuck is that guy?
You know Jeremy Stephens?
That's the Conor McGregor. That's the Conor McGregor from the press conference when Jeremy Stephens said that I should fight him next.
I didn't know. Dang, I didn't know.
That was Jeremy Stephens. Yeah,
really?
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
I wasn't even watching UFC back then.
Yeah, that was so okay, I'm gonna send you that clip after this. It's an all-timer. It's one, I think that was leading up to the Conor McGregor, I want to say Jose Aldo fight, but I might be wrong. It might have been like the second Nate Diaz fight or something. But they had this huge press conference, and Conor McGregor was in all-time form, just talking shit and saying all kinds of crazy stuff. And they asked him like, who should you fight next, or something about like, who are you worried about, some kind of divisional implication thing.
Right.
And Jeremy Stephens, who has a fight on that same card, is sitting up higher, and he grabs his mic and he goes, the hardest hitting 145 pounder in the division, blah, blah, blah. And he just goes on. And then you see Conor just kind of looking up, and he's like, who the fuck is that guy? It was one of the funniest moments in the UFC history. I'll send that to you later.
Oh my God. We definitely have to check that out. But that's going to be a fun fight as well, right? Andrei Arlovsky he's going to be on the card, right? You have Abdul Razak Al Hassan. He's a guy that's a knockout artist. Any fights on that card? Oh, dude, Violent Bob Ross, Luis Pena. That's my favorite nickname in the UFC.
Yeah,
Violent Bob Ross.
It's a really good one.
And if you've seen this guy, he looks exactly like Violent Bob Ross. But any card on this fight that you or any fight on this card that's maybe a little bit slept on?
I'm gonna go with the Violent Bob Ross fight because I didn't know he was fighting. I haven't had a chance to scout the. Anybody listening here, you gotta understand there are so many damn fights that I don't even realize who's fighting unless it's like a massive pay-per-view event until like maybe 5 or 6 days beforehand, and then I'll start getting into it. So I'm gonna say I'm looking forward most to that fight, and yeah, Violent Bob Ross, man, how can you not love him?
I'm so super excited for
Bobby
Bob Ross.
Knuckles.
That's going to be a fun one. I cannot wait for that one as well. But let's see if I can get it right here. Dang, I cannot. I was trying to get a picture of Violent Bob Ross. I need to learn to do this work like Manny, dude. Manny knows how to do this shit real good. But man, Violent Bob Ross.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. Actually, I think I know exactly what I need to do. Bang. You're seeing live production.
Get that afro right up there.
Let's go.
Hey.
Violent Bob Ross.
He just looks like a wild man.
Look at him. That's legitimately a Violent Bob Ross right there.
That looks like a dude I don't want to fight, man. He looks like he'll go to a dark place. Look at that hair.
Look at him, dude. He's just so. I mean, he's so majestic too, right? Like he's just phenomenal. He's great. And let's look at the Mike Perry's nose real quick, because that was if you missed Mike Perry's nose and you don't know, like now you know.
Ugh.
You remember this fight, dude?
That's terrible. Is that the Luque fight?
That was the Luque fight.
Oh, jeez.
Imagine having
That's
your nose.
I did. I had my nose broken. Maybe not quite that bad. Like 85% as bad as that. I want to say. Like I was in sparring with who's the guy? I forget. He was like a provincial national champ. He was a provincial champion here where I live in Quebec, in Canada, in Taekwondo. And we were just light sparring, whatever. Like I was doing pretty well in the sparring. I always did well against Taekwondo guys because their hands usually suck. And I always worked my hands. Like I was working a lot of boxing. And so I was doing pretty well with the boxing, but we're going light. And then all of a sudden, dude, I don't know if he gets mad or it's an ego thing or whatever. I'm also a moron because I'm dropping my hands and I'm dicking around. But at the same time, like I said, we're not sparring hard. So if I get popped, it's okay. It's just like I'm just working on my head movement and whatnot. He throws like a spinning like tornado Taekwondo. I don't even know what the kick is called. And cracks me right across the nose. Bang. And my nose is my nose is like under my eye. Like it's directly under my eye. I run to the bathroom and I see that it's like completely under my eye. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I just took my two fingers and I went and I put it right back in place and I was good to go.
Oh my God, dude.
Yeah.
And you put it back in place?
I put it back in place. It wasn't painful, but then I went to the hospital and it's a good little header there. I went to the hospital and because I felt like, I don't know, my head coach was like, no, you got to go to the hospital. And I'm like, why? Like it's in place. It's like, no, you got to go to the hospital. They might tell you something's wrong with it, whatever. I said, okay, fine. So I go to the hospital. I don't know if any of y'all know, but in Canada, we have free healthcare. Woo, free healthcare. But what that really means is you wait at the emergency room for like 7 hours sometimes before you'll see a doctor. So I sit in the emergency room all night. I got out of sparring like 10 p.m. It's like maybe 2 a.m. or something. I finally see a doctor and she tells me, oh, you're good. Like, I don't need to do it. You're good. It's in place. And I said, oh, well, that's great that I waited here for 6 hours. And she's like, well, you know what? It's really good, though, that you put it back in place when you did, because if you hadn't, I would have had to re-break it now and put it back in place now, which would have hurt and insane. She would have had to re-break my nose. So you ever break your nose, kids? You know what? I don't want to give medical advice. Never mind. Don't break your nose.
If you do, I mean, the doctor said that it was good that he put his nose back into place. So that's her advice, right? But man, we got some good fights coming up. Let's before we get into this, there's a couple of Bellator and one on TNT fights that are coming up as well. With that light heavyweight tournament and that bantamweight tournament as well. Those are gonna be fun coming up.
Yes.
All right, my man. But
let's wrap it
there. Yeah, we got I think we got everything out, right? So good stuff there, guys. Appreciate everybody joining us. There's nobody watching us right now, but hey, thanks everybody for watching us earlier. It's been a long show. Any last words before you get this closed up?
Good. See all of y'all in the comments right now. We'll see y'all next weekend, next Saturday. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for checking out Walkouts and Knockouts, brought to you by 5 Reasons Sports Network. We got Ariel Tias. I'm Jonathan. I hope you guys have a great day and enjoy all the fights coming up.